On one side of the map, the world's largest democracy, forged in the fire of colonial rule. On the other, superpower, fresh from victory in the Second World War, casting long shadows over a divided planet. Two nations, two ideals. But for decades, barely a handshake. What happens when old strangers decide to dance together? When nuclear fear meets strategic desire? When diplomacy becomes a game of shadows? This is not just history, it's a story waiting to explode. Since 1947, India and the United States, two of the most significant democracies on Earth, began with hope, idealism, and cautious distance. Over decades, suspicion, global rivalry, and nuclear-age anxieties kept them apart. Yet today, the two countries stand as strategic partners. What triggered this dramatic transformation? How did they go from wary outsiders to uneasy but powerful allies? And in that shift, what did the world gain? And what did it risk? This is a suspenseful unraveling of secrets, deals, and alliance sees a thriller of geopolitics, where the stakes are global stability, nuclear power, and the fate of billions. Two giants awaken, one from centuries of foreign rule, another from the ashes of global war. One chose freedom, the other power. Yet, in the decades that followed, they edged apart, not together. Why did two democracies with such promise drift into deep suspicion? In August 1947, India finally broke free. The British left, the tricolor flag rose, and a new chapter began. At the same time, the world was reshaping itself. The Second World War had left two titans vying for global influence. The capitalist West, led by the United States, and the communist East, led by the Soviet Union. The USA, the victor and global policeman, watched the decolonizing world closely, seeing potential allies in its new global order. When India declared independence, the US recognized it. On paper, it was a great opportunity. Two democracies, shared ideals, a chance at cooperation. But reality would tell a different story. Because in the Cold War's chessboard, neutrality often meant suspicion. And India, under its first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, opted for a third path: non-alignment. Nehru's vision was that newly liberated, newly poor nations should not be forced into camps defined by distant powers. India should chart its own destiny. But to Washington, non-alignment looked like strategic unreliability. If you don't choose a side, you might be an ally today or a friend of the USSR tomorrow. That made American policymakers wary from the very start. Thus began a long period of cautious diplomacy, limited trust, and mutual mistrust. Despite diplomatic formalities, true closeness did not come. From the 1950s to the 60s, cooperation was limited, mostly involving humanitarian aid. When severe food shortages struck India, the US provided relief through programs like PL 480. There were offers of technological assistance, cooperation in agriculture, and even modest defense-related aid during crises. But these gestures never translated into a deep alliance. Why? India's leadership refused to commit to any formal bloc, wary of Cold War entanglements. Meanwhile, the US remained focused on containing communism, aligning with states that clearly sided with the West. India's refusal made it perpetually suspect. Plus, India's state-driven socialist economy was uncomfortably different from America's capitalist vision. The handshake was shallow, the foundation brittle. The first serious test of India's security came in 1962. India fought a border war with China that exposed its vulnerabilities. The Chinese army advanced swiftly, rattling the young Indian Republic. India needed help. It turned to the USA. To some surprise, the US responded with limited aid supplies, mortar, artillery, but not the full-throated backing India hoped for. The assistance was cautious. India was treated not as a partner, but as a regional contingency. This widened the gap of trust. India increasingly looked elsewhere to the Soviet Union, which offered weapons, diplomatic support, and aligned more closely with India's worldview. Over the years, India deepened ties with the Soviet camp, further alienating Washington. The 1960s laid bare a growing divergence. If the 60s exposed cracks, the early 70s shattered the fragile rapport entirely. In 1971, a historic conflict erupted. A quest for autonomy in East Pakistan spiraled into civil war. Violence surged. Millions of refugees fled toward India. India, under Indira Gandhi, watched the horror unfold, then intervened militarily, supporting the liberation movement of what would become Bangladesh. The US faced a choice. On one side, democratic values. On the other, Cold War strategy. The US had spent decades forging alliances to counter Soviet influence, and an important partner in that design was Pakistan. Supporting India risked undoing those alignments. So, when war erupted, the US picked Pakistan. The US dispatched the USS Enterprise and the 7th Fleet into the Bay of Bengal, signaling support for Pakistan. To India, it was a shock, a betrayal. To many in India, the self-styled champion of democracy had sided with a military dictatorship committing atrocities. Trust eroded permanently. When the smoke cleared and Bangladesh emerged, the bitterness remained. The memory of 1971 haunted India-US relations for decades. Even as the war scars lingered, India's leaders made a dramatic decision. On May 18, 1974, India carried out its first nuclear test, codenamed Smiling Buddha. In the deserts of Pokhran, a new reality was born. For India, it was a statement of sovereignty. A declaration that it would defend itself on its own terms. For Washington, the test was a blow. It challenged the fragile nuclear non-proliferation order. Condemnation soon gave way to the diplomatic cooling and isolation of India from advanced nuclear cooperation. India was relegated to the category of a nuclear pariah. This meant limited cooperation in science and technology, and greater suspicion of India's military and scientific advances. For the relationship, it became another layer of distrust. With trust broken, India turned toward the Soviet Union. In August 1971, just months before the Bangladesh crisis, India and the Soviet Union signed the Indo-Soviet Treaty of Peace, Friendship, and Cooperation. The treaty embodied a real security alignment, promising mutual support in times of crisis. For India, the West was no longer an option. The Soviet bloc offered dependable defense, arms, and diplomatic support. For the USA, this only confirmed its earlier suspicions. India was not just non-aligned in principle. In practice, it was tilting east. This made any deeper US-India alliance improbable. From the 1970s through the 1980s, the relationship remained in this frozen stasis. Occasional diplomatic contacts, some economic interactions, but no trust, no shared vision. As the world moved into the 1980s, a few things changed. The Cold War continued to rage. India faced economic challenges and internal crises. There were a few efforts at rapprochement, but the wounds ran deep. The memories of 1971, the lingering distrust after the nuclear tests, and the divergent alliances made trust extremely fragile. For nearly 5 decades since independence, the relationship remained what scholars call estranged democracies. By 1990, as the Cold War neared its end, the global order was subtly shifting. The USSR was showing signs of collapse. The bipolar world was fragmenting. For India and the USA, the decades of mistrust would not disappear overnight. But the foundations for change were being laid. Decades of independence, decades of isolation, decades of unspoken suspicion. The world shifted, but their relationship remained frozen in the cold memory of history. The Cold War may have frozen relationships, but history never stays frozen forever. When the frost thaws, new paths emerge. And in the early 1990s, a new chapter will begin, one of deals, realignments, and a shock no one saw coming. The world changed. The giant that India leaned on, the Soviet Union, collapsed overnight. The Cold War ended. And suddenly, India stood alone in a storm it never prepared for. This was the moment history forced a choice. The moment that would change everything. 1991. A year etched into the DNA of modern India. The Soviet Union, India's closest strategic and economic partner, disintegrated. Trade systems collapsed. Supply chains broke. Decades-old agreements evaporated. At home, a devastating economic crisis struck, the worst since independence. Foreign exchange reserves plummeted so low that India could pay for only 2 weeks of imports. Gold bars were flown abroad for emergency loans. Poverty rose. Investments froze. The economy was suffocating. India had 2 choices: collapse into chaos or reinvent itself. The government, led by Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao and Finance Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh, made a historic decision. A revolution without protests, without riots, without bullets. India opened its economy. Liberalization began. Barriers fell. Foreign investment was welcomed. The economic walls India had built for decades were dismantled. For the first time in its history, India needed the West. It needed global trade, technology, capital, and investment. And standing at the center of this new world was the United States. For the first time in 50 years, India was not proudly distant. It was forced by destiny itself to extend a hand. In the United States, policymakers realized something extraordinary was happening. The Cold War was over. The U.S. had emerged as the world's sole superpower. Global capitalism was rising. Technology was reshaping the future. And suddenly, India, once distant, once socialist, once aligned with Moscow, was opening its doors. American companies were eager. Tech companies saw a massive market. Investors saw opportunity. Strategic planners saw a future partner with the world's second-largest population. Silently, unexpectedly, the ice began to melt. Diplomatic dialogue strengthened. Economic cooperation intensified. Trade between the two nations expanded rapidly. The bitterness of the 1970s didn't disappear, but a new reality began to overshadow the old ghosts. And yet, history does not change overnight. The shadow of mistrust still lingered. 2 democracies moved closer. Carefully, slowly, measuring every step. Just when proximity seemed possible, history struck again. May 1998. India shocked the world by conducting 5 underground nuclear tests at Pokhran. The headline: India is now a declared nuclear weapons state. For the Indian public, it was triumph. For Indian leadership, it was sovereignty. For the memory of 1971, it was justice. But for Washington, it was outrage. Sanctions were imposed. Partnership froze. Optimism died overnight. Once again, trust broke. Once again, suspicion returned. And yet, something different happened this time. Instead of 50 years of silence, the world saw only months of tension. The United States realized that India's decision was not aggression, but a security necessity in a dangerous neighborhood bordered by nuclear Pakistan and nuclear China. Slowly, dialogue resumed. Diplomats talked. Leaders negotiated. And by the early 2000s, a historic transformation began. September 11, 2001. A day that changed the world. A day that reshaped U.S. foreign policy forever. Terrorism became the central threat, replacing communism. New alliances were needed. New partners became essential. And suddenly, America saw India not as a distant acquaintance, but as a natural ally. A democracy in a region dominated by authoritarian powers. A rising economy. A key military and strategic presence in the Indian Ocean. A stable counterweight to China. For the first time, US presidents described India as the world's largest democracy and a natural partner. High-level visits multiplied. Military cooperation expanded. Trade accelerated. American companies poured investment into India's booming IT sector, turning cities like Bangalore, Hyderabad, Pune, and Gurgaon into global technology hubs. The narrative changed. Suspicion transformed into partnership. Distance turned into friendship. This was the moment when history reversed itself, when decades of mistrust were rewritten. In 2005, negotiations began for a landmark agreement, the India-US Civil Nuclear Cooperation Deal. What made it extraordinary? For the first time in history, the US was ready to recognize India's nuclear status. End sanctions and isolation allow civilian nuclear technology and fuel supply, and accept a country outside the Non-Proliferation Treaty system. This was not just a deal. It was a declaration. We trust you. When it was finalized in 2008, it symbolically ended the Cold War between India and the United States. The two estranged democracies were now strategic partners. After 6 decades of distance, they embraced. The 2010s accelerated everything. The defense partnership deepened. Joint military exercises increased. Defense agreements like Kamkasa, Becca, and Lamoa enhanced strategic cooperation. India began purchasing advanced US weapons. The Indo-Pacific region became a shared security vision. In technology and space, NASA and ISRO aligned their programs. Digital cooperation expanded, with big tech companies building their largest global offices in India. And then came the rise of the Quad. India, the USA, Japan, and Australia formed a strategic coalition designed to counter China's aggressive expansion. From estranged adversaries, they became partners, shaping the future of Asia. By the 2020s, the transformation was complete. India and the US today are major defense partners, the largest democracies on Earth, major trade partners, technology collaborators, and Indo-Pacific strategic anchors. They exchange military intelligence, share defense logistics agreements, and conduct joint naval strategies. Things that were impossible to imagine in 1971 are now routine. The world witnesses something unbelievable. Two nations that once stood separated by oceans of distrust now stand as allies in shaping the world order. But the story is not simple. The relationship remains powerful, but not perfect. There are still tensions over visas and IT labor, disagreements on trade, criticisms over human rights, and sanctions threats over Russian arms. There are differences on Palestine, Ukraine, and Israel. This is not a fairy tale friendship. It is an interest-based partnership, a marriage of necessity, a dance of power, ambition, and survival. The beauty of the story is this: two nations once divided by mistrust now depend on each other. Today, India and the United States stand together, but history whispers a warning. Trust once broken is never fully healed. Alliances built on ambition can crumble. The world is changing again. A new Cold War is rising, this time with China. Will India and the United States walk into the future as partners, or will history repeat itself? The next decade will decide everything. The story of India's relations is not a simple tale of friendship. It is a story of misunderstandings, betrayals, survival, power, and transformation. Story of how two estranged democracies crossed oceans of suspicion to stand shoulder to shoulder in a world filled with uncertainty. And now, the world watches. Will they build the future together, or walk apart once again? As the world stepped into a new decade, the global order was shifting. Economic powers were rising, technology was advancing at unprecedented speeds, and the balance of influence was being tested like never before. In the center of this dynamic stage stood India and the United States, two of the world. As largest democracies whose partnership was becoming one of the most important and intriguing. Stories of the 21st century. At the forefront of this evolving relationship was Prime Minister Narendra Modi, whose leadership and vision symbolized India's rising global influence. But what we see on the surface, the handshakes, the grand events, the powerful speeches, only one part of a much deeper, more complex story. A story filled with suspense, strategic foresight, and decisions that could reshape our future. The 2020s arrived with a storm of unprecedented challenges. The global pandemic reshaped economies, accelerated technological transformation, and forced nations to reevaluate their alliances. In this new era, India, with its growing economy and strategic location, became a central player. The United States, recognizing the shift, saw the strategic importance of a strong partnership with India, especially in the vast Indo-Pacific region. This partnership is built on a foundation of shared interests, boosting economic growth, fueling technological innovation, and reinforcing democratic values. But it's also a delicate dance between public perception and quiet, strategic planning. The story of this alliance is about what happens both in front of the cameras and behind closed doors. The meetings between Prime Minister Modi and the US President became global events. Summits, rallies, and state visits captured the world's attention, filled with symbolic gestures and powerful messages. Observers noted the clear rapport between the leaders. But this was more than just personal chemistry. It symbolized a deep alignment of national priorities. We saw economic cooperation through trade deals, defense collaboration through public agreements, and joint efforts in space exploration and climate initiatives, while the world watched the speeches and ceremonial handshakes. These events sent a clear signal to other nations. India and the United States were building a new level of mutual engagement on the world stage. But beneath the surface of this public diplomacy lies a framework of powerful strategic agreements. Over the years, India and the US formalized their cooperation through several key pacts. LMOA enables mutual support for defense logistics. COMCASA facilitates secure communications for defense systems, and BECA allows for the sharing of critical geospatial intelligence. These agreements, while technical, represent a profound level of trust. And at the heart of this strategic vision is the Indo-Pacific region. It's one of the most significant geopolitical arenas of our time, critical for global trade, maritime security, and technological development. Their focus is on maintaining open maritime routes, promoting regional stability, and coordinating humanitarian efforts. Analysts emphasize that this alliance is defensive and cooperative, not aggressive. Yet it signals a long-term strategic alignment. The mystery for global observers is how this partnership will evolve and shape the next decades of geopolitical influence. How can nations work together to maintain stability without triggering confrontation? The answer is being written in the waters of the Indo-Pacific. They are working together on satellite navigation and space projects. They're exchanging knowledge and partnering on research in artificial intelligence. At the same time, US companies are investing heavily in India, while Indian tech firms are expanding their global reach. This growing interdependence creates a multidimensional partnership that strengthens both nations. Many analysts argue this economic and technological collaboration is just as influential as defense cooperation, shaping the future in ways that are both visible and hidden from public view. The public sees celebrations and handshakes, but the real power of the partnership is built on policy, economic ties, and quiet, long-term planning. It's a multi-layered relationship where appearances, agreements, and actions all work together to shape global influence. So, what does this all mean for the world? The India-US partnership has significant implications for global stability. It strengthens democratic collaboration, enhances regional security in the Indo-Pacific, and supports technological and economic growth. But critical questions remain unanswered, adding to the suspense. How will future leadership changes in either country affect this partnership? Can their economic interdependence withstand the next global crisis? And what role will India ultimately play as a major global power in the 21st century? These uncertainties keep the narrative engaging. Each new summit, agreement, or joint initiative adds another layer of intrigue to this ongoing story. It's a real-time thriller of global relations, and we are all watching it unfold. As we conclude this chapter, it's clear the India-United States partnership is far more than a tale of policy or diplomacy. It is an evolving narrative of strategic foresight, quiet collaboration, and shared interests. The true suspense lies in what comes next. Will this partnership continue to strengthen and help shape a stable global order? Or will new challenges alter its course? The story of India and the United States is still being written, and its next chapter could redefine the balance of power for generations to come. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the forces shaping our world.